G'day and welcome to Starship EVO's survival update. In this video I'm going to go through the beginning of survival and how we get from a crashed ship to a ship that we can hopefully use to explore a little bit of space and start collecting our resources to go from there. So to begin with, we click play, create a new character, give it a name. There are some randomly generated things, that's why there's a seed here, but for now I don't think it needs to be worried about. You just need to make sure we change the game mode over to survival if it's set on creative. Then you can customize your appearance. Don't worry if you don't end up liking what you choose, you can always change it once you get into the game as well. And then we can click play with this character. When you load in, you'll be met with this medical bay and your character being slowly printed off. If you're impatient, you can expedite this process by holding down F and you'll see a little wheel come up and that'll exit you from this. But if you do wait, you'll just get automatically popped out once your character is fully printed. Now that we're out of there, we can begin our journey to attempt to recover ourselves from this crash. What we're going to need to do first is, as the on-screen hints are saying, we need to open our codex with tab and find our tools tab. Our tools tab here is here on the left, and the tools that I'm going to add to my hotbar first are going to be this mining tool, as it's telling me. Now it's not click and drag. Click and drag doesn't work. It's click once and then click once again to get it into that slot. Same with this link tool. We're going to be using that later, so we'll add that into the second slot. And the other one that I've been using a fair bit is this one, the anti-grav tool. It's basically your means to flip your vehicle over if you crash land awkwardly and can't flip it back over with its own controls. That's why I've been using that one a lot. So with those in hand, we can now head over to our wreck and start getting some useful materials from it. From our wreck, we'll get some scrap. I've not been able to retrieve anything else useful, but the scrap itself is quite useful and it's a very easy way to get some blocks, which we can use for building out our base as well as building out our future ship. So I'll collect a reasonable amount of this so that I can make a decent sized platform, because that's going to make it a lot easier to display all the things that we're going to work on as we go through this. You may notice on the left hand side of my HUD that as I collect more of this scrap, my little backpack bar in grey is slowly filling up. Don't worry too much about that. You can comfortably collect more than your backpack's capacity, but it does slow you down. In this case, we don't really have to worry too much because we're about to do something that's going to make that less of an issue. What we're going to do is we're going to open the codex again. And we're going to go to our crafting tab. And we're going to turn some of this scrap into both a starter block and into scrappy hull, both of which will reduce their mass and their volume, which will allow us to move normally again. So I'll craft that, holding down left click until the bar is done. We only need one of these. Don't worry about creating too much, but the rest of this scrap I'm going to turn into hull. You probably don't need to make as much as I'm going to. I'm going to make a bunch of it because I want to make a nice open area so that we can look at all the components and see how things are working and make it a lot clearer to follow. Also, these will be useful later when we go to make our ship. So it's not going to be wasted effort anyway. With our starter block in hand, we can now begin constructing either a base or a ship. With this starter block, it will either appear blue if you're going to create some sort of ship, or it'll be green if you're going to make some sort of station. It'll turn green as you look at the ground. We can change the size of this starter block with G, which we can use to change the size of any blocks that we like. G will increase in size and cycle round. Shift G will go back to the previous size. So G forward, Shift G back. In this case, I'm going to start with this sort of size. Then I'm going to place some scrappy hull on this. So if we want to make a fairly thin floor, we can go down to the smallest size. And if I'm on the top of this block, I'll get two axes that go along the same plane as the face that I'm looking at. If I move around to the side of the block, it'll be this plane, the vertical plane. We can switch which plane we're extending this block out in by pressing R. So I can move this out to create a gigantic cube. We don't want to do that. If I place something that I dislike, with a block in hand, I can right click and remove it. But now let's get properly started. So let's make a floor, looking at the top, which is going to give us our horizontal plane. I'm going to make something that's decently large. 4x4 seems decent. And then I'm going to make myself a little ramp so that I can get onto this. So if I scroll down, I'll get my slope here, and then I can press R to rotate it around, Shift R to go backwards, and R to go around so that it's a slope, allowing me to walk up here. I can then click and drag along this face. Now, because I'm on this face, I can only drag upwards, which isn't what I want. I want to drag outwards, so we'll press R, and we can drag this shape outwards until it intersects with the ground, like so. And we have a nice little ramp to walk up onto our little platform. So we're going to open up our menu again, and we're going to go to the crafting tab and scroll down until we see here a crafting bench. Because we can't make much in our suit, so we need the crafting bench to get us the next step along. And for that, we need some wood logs. So for that, we're going to need a tree, and I think the closest one is on the far side of this wreck. Using our mining tool, we can collect some timber from these trees and use them for that crafting bench, as well as some other things. Give it a quick zap. When you got somewhere between 10 and 20 timber, head back. This will be enough to get us started, but we will need to collect more later. Since I used up my scrap before creating all these blocks, I'll grab some more from the wreck too. And that'll do. Now, click and hold, and we'll create this crafting bench. That'll have gone straight into my backpack, so let's move it onto my hotbar. Shift scroll to get onto my second hotbar, and we can place this down. If, like me, the positions available to you for placing this aren't exactly what you want, like I'd like to move this 2 little blocks over, what we can do is we can press F1, and you'll see here this option for placement subgrid. Native grid means it will place at the size of the block, which is more obvious if we go back over to our armor blocks. So with this armor block, we've got the smallest size and we can move it anywhere. With the next size up, it only moves in 2-step increments, and the next size up, 4-step increments. Next size up again, 8, and then back to the smallest. If we want to move at the smallest increments with all of the blocks, what we can do is press F1 and then expand these grid settings options. And for placement subgrid, you can change this from native grid to half grid or quarter grid. And quarter grid is going to allow us to move these things much more freely and place them with much greater finesse. So for our crafting bench, instead of being locked into this larger grid, we're now able to move this much smaller bits, and I can move it even over into this corner like that. We've got our crafting bench. With our crafting bench, we can open it up and see what we can make from it. There are a few things we want to make, I think, pretty early on. I think number 1 goal is going to be this storage backpack add-on. This is going to give us a bit more capacity in our backpack, allowing us to go out and collect a bit more resources. And number 2 is this hoverboard. This is my preferred mobility option, because as you might have noticed, walking around and having to get to all the resources around here is going to be quite slow. Getting to those trees even slow. So let's get those made and see where we can go from there. So for our storage backpack add-on, that's pretty easy. We just need some plate. Scroll down here, we find some plate. Craft that. Scroll back up, and we can now make our storage backpack add-on. Make one of those, press tab, and it'll be here in your backpack. This can now be moved over into one of these 2 slots. I'm going to make 2 of these for now, because we've added a bit, but not a lot, to our storage, and these are cheap enough that we can replace them later. So let's make 2. Fill up both of those slots. And now let's look at the next thing we want to make, which is the hoverboard. For this, we need some plate, which we can make easily, but we also need some copper spools. If we scroll down here, we'll find copper spools near the bottom, and this requires copper ingots and wood logs. We've gotten the wood logs, but we haven't got the copper ingots. If we want copper ingots, let's go the next step deeper. We need to smelt some copper ore in a crucible. So let's make a crucible. We need 4 steel plate, which is 1 and 2, because you get 2 at a time. So we've got 4. Now we need to just collect some stone. For collecting stone, you have a bunch of options. You can just wander around and pick up these rocks off the surface. Just grab them with F. The little ones, not these bigger ones. And this way we can get 4, or you can get out your mining drill and just drill near these rocks. Like for these bigger ones, just drill nearby and it will come into your inventory. Now that's pretty heavy, so I don't really want to have to carry that rock back to base because I'm not really going to use it. So I can press tab, find this large stone, click it, and then just click away, and it'll throw it away. And now I can move normally to get back to my platform. So go back to our crafting bench, and we've now got the materials for our crucible. So we'll craft that. Grab it from our backpack, and I'm going to pop it on our deck. I'll put it right next to our crafting bench. So our Crucible will need fuel. We've got some logs, let's pop those in. It's also got a bit of storage capacity, so I'm going to use that for the moment, just to drop these bits in that I don't need to be carrying around. And now we need to go find some copper. To find copper, what you need to do is press V. As you can see down in our bottom left of our HUD, V is like a radio symbol. That's because it's a scanner. It's going to put out this pulse that's going to show a bunch of resources in the local area. You can see we've got iron, silver, and gold over there. Silver up this way, press it again if the things are going away, and some copper there. Iron. I think that seems to be my closest copper, so that's the way I'm going to go. Maybe that one's closer. Let's see which one shows up first from the pulse. Oh, this one's much closer. We'll go here and grab some copper. So it's a little bit deep underground, but we should be able to get there with our mining tool if we're a little bit patient. There we go. Once we get down deep enough, you'll start seeing this sort of shiny veined rock appear. The color of the vein will indicate the sort of ore that you're going to get from it. And you will get a bunch of rock too, but you can see some copper showing up in my inventory. I'm going to mine till I have 20 or so copper, and then I'll head back to base. Of course, this deposit's quite small, so I may run out of deposit before I actually get that much copper. All right, so we've got a decent amount of copper, but I'm already overloaded. So just like before, I'm going to get rid of this stone that I'm not going to use for a while, and that's so easily obtained that I don't need to hold on to it. But I'm a little bit stuck in this hole. So if you're down in a hole like this one, you've got a couple of options of how you can get out. You can dig out a path that you can sort of jump and climb your way out of. Or if you're really stuck and you can't find a way out, you can press F5, which activates no clip mode and allows you to just get yourself out. Useful if you're actually properly stuck, or if you're just getting impatient and you just want to get out of the hole. But that is a debug mode sort of thing. So my preference is to try and do things in a more in the survival world sort of way. Now that we've got our copper, we can head over to this furnace and we can pop the copper in the input and it will start getting processed with those logs being used as fuel. Checking again to see what we needed. We need how many copper spools for our hoverboard? We need 2. So we need at least 2 copper ingots. Once those 2 are made, we can make ourselves a hoverboard, and then mobility is a lot easier, which is going to be good because we're going to go out and mine a whole lot of other metals to get to the next stage. All right, 2 copper ingots, move these across to my inventory, and we can scroll down and realize that I haven't brought my logs back. I need to grab some of the logs, so let's grab some of those out of here too, so we can actually make these copper spools. Craft 2 of those. Craft some plate from our scrap. Then we can make ourselves a hoverboard. There we go. Now with this hoverboard, we can find it in our backpack and move it across into this mobility slot here. Once it's in your mobility slot, you can press P and activate the hoverboard, which does look like a hoverboard. Using the hoverboard is a little bit different to other forms of mobility in the game. For this, you want to actually tap W to get going, because tapping W gives you a little bit of a kick and makes you go faster. Holding W doesn't really work. So with this, you can see how much more quickly I can move about the terrain and get where we need to go. There are a couple of reasons that I like the hoverboard the most of the 2 early mobility options, which are the scooter or the hoverboard. But the main reason I like the scooter the most is that it doesn't require 4 silver contact mesh. We're going to need to collect a bunch of silver later, but the hoverboard is just that much cheaper, and I actually find it easier to use. Worth trying both to see which is better to your personal preferences, but for me, the hoverboard is the one I prefer. Even once I have access to silver and the other things needed, I still prefer the hoverboard. So now that we've got mobility, we've got a furnace, we've got our crafting bench, what do we want to do next? The next thing we need to do in order to get ourselves mobile with a proper ship is to build some power source on this base so that we can power an assembler. The only power source we have available to us right now is the wind turbine. So we're going to need to make the components required for that. The wind turbine needs some construction components, silver contact mesh, and copper spools. We know how to make copper spools. We've got some copper smelting and we know how to get trees. The construction components need some iron, so we'll need to smelt some of that. And the silver contact mesh needs both silver and iron. So we're going to have to smelt both of those. Now that's going to be a fair bit of smelting, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make another smelter. Grab some more scrap here so we can make a plate to do that. And we can grab a little bit of stone. Just as before, make our plate, make our crucible. You may want to make even more than 2. I found that 2's kind of been enough to move things along, but if you're impatient enough, you may want 1 for copper, 1 for silver, and 1 for iron as you collect those and just run them through here. So we'll place our extra furnace down. We're going to need some fuel for this. I'll just pop these logs in there for now. And then we're going to go out and we're going to collect the silver, the iron, and the copper that's needed. We've got already 9 copper ingots, so it's going to be silver and iron first. Activating our hoverboard with P, pressing V, and we'll get this silver first because it's nice and close. Conveniently, this one is on the surface. Press P to deactivate that. Now, if you're not so close to your base that you still have a direct line of sight to it, when you press V, you can notice that these signs show up saying where your station is, where a ship is, and where a wreck is. So those indicators will show up even if you're a fair distance away from them, helping you find your way home. Which is useful if you have anything even vaguely approaching the terrible sense of direction that I have. So let's get this silver refining. With a bit of the iron smelted, we'll grab that, pop it into our hotbar there. Grab the silver as well, and we'll grab out half of the wood from the furnace as well. We right click on the fuel, we'll grab half of it. You can do that with any stack, right click grabs half. Then we can head over to our crafting bench and scroll all the way down because we are going to need to make some wind turbines because we need some power to supply to the assembler. So what we're going to make first off is one of these guys. So we need 1 for that. We need a silver contact mesh. We'll make that. And we need 4 construction components. So that's going to be letting this craft twice. 1 and 2. So now we can make our first wind turbine. I actually think we'd probably be better off making more than 1 wind turbine. I'll show you why soon, but we are going to need to make a few of these and maybe ultimately also some solar panels to try and get enough power to go do all the things we need to do. So I'm going to make 2 wind turbines. There we go. Then I'm also going to make the necessary parts so that we can make this assembler. So that's, again, more of these construction components, more silver contact plates, whole bunch of copper wire, and some plate. So we now have a couple of wind turbines and an assembler. And for the wind turbine, there are different sizes of base we can make. With our 2 blocks, I'm going to go for this medium size here, and I'm going to stretch it 1 block up. And that's as big a turbine as we can make. That's why we probably are going to need to make more of these, but that's enough to get us started. So now we can get our assembler built. And I might place it over here. Now that we've got our assembler, we can press F to use it, and one of the first things we want to build from it is probably going to be a jetpack. The reason I think a jetpack is important to build early on is so that when we're mining in a hole, we don't have to dig a path out. We can just turn on the jetpack and fly out, which is really quite handy. Combining the jetpack with the hoverboard, you've got most of your mobility needs handled. So what we're going to do is we're going to transfer our iron, copper, silver, and scrap into the assembler. You can shift click to transfer between inventories like that. We can grab any of the other stuff that's been smelted out of our smelters over here, pop that across. And then if we click on jetpack, if we had enough stuff in here, we would be able to make it. So I'm going to order this up, and you'll see that it'll try and order up the other components, but these copper spools, they need wood logs, so they're not going to get made. So let's go get some wood, and then that can get all built up. We're probably going to need quite a few copper spools, so I'll collect a decent amount of wood this time. There are multiple different types of wood that you'll collect. Some look a little more orange, and then some that look a little more green, like these ones. At this early stage, doesn't matter which one you collect. They stack as 2 separate stacks, but there's no stack limit within the machines, so it doesn't matter if you have multiple different stacks. It just matters how many you have all up. The only place where the stack numbers might matter is on your hotbar. But in your assembler, even this production queue, that's not just 5 slots. You can keep adding things and adding things and adding things. I'm going to cancel all those because I don't want any of those. but you can add as many as you like. It'll go onto multiple layers. So let's transfer the wood across. That means the copper spools can get made, and we can get a jetpack. You may notice that it's quite slow to order up the parts as it realizes it needs them. Part of that is likely to be due to the very low power state that we have on this build. We can check how bad the power situation is by looking on the bottom right of our HUD right now, where it's requiring infinitely more than I'm producing. But also, if we press tab and then go to the spaceship current entity button up here, and this is looking now at our base, we can see the power generated is 21 energy per second, but the draw is 820. That is a lot more than we're making. So this small turbine is not doing a great deal. And it's not even consistently 21. It varies. 76, 46, 47, 56, 79. And that's the reason why once we get this jetpack, we're going to make a battery. The jetpack's finished, so let's pop that into our inventory. So we'll go back to our backpack. And the jetpack needs to go in a backpack slot. You can tell which slot it goes in by this little icon in the top left. So we need to remove one of our storage add-ons, which is unfortunate. We're not really going to use this, so I'm just going to go boop, and pop it on the floor. So we'll pop that in though, because I want to have a jetpack. If you don't like the idea of clearing out your inventory and you only use the jetpack occasionally, you might want to put it in your backpack, because you could put it in here and then just use it when you actually need it, transfer it across, transfer it back, that sort of thing. But I tend to like it just being there, so I'm going to leave it in my backpack. Because if we now look at the assembler, we can see that there are options for even more storage. We can see that there's storage backpack add-on 1, which adds 500, which is what we've got, and we had 2 of those, but now we're down to half. Or there's backpack add-on 2, which is double, so we could replace our 2 with just 1. Backpack add-on 3 has some resources that are probably beyond us right now, because sunstones are gained from space, so we'll leave that for now. But the storage add-on 2 just needs a gold ingot. We've seen gold around here, so we could go get that. But before we go off hunting for gold, since the assembler's not going to be doing anything while we're away, this wind turbine is going to be just producing power for nothing. So it would be better if we had some batteries. So for batteries, we're going to need to make 2 things. We're going to need to make a housing for them to sit on the base, and we're going to need to make the power cells themselves. So we're going to make these power cells. I would like to make, let's say 4 of them. So make 4 power cells, about 4 times. And then we scroll down here and we look for power cell base. We'll make one of those. So we've got our power cell base. Pop this on my hopper, or accidentally throw it on the floor. We'll press F to pick that up. Then power cells. And now let's have a look at this. So this has multiple sizes. It has this size and it has a small size. We made standard cells, so we need the bigger size. And I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 of those down. Scroll to my next hotbar with shift, and we're going to pop all of these batteries in. Now that the assembler's finished, these batteries should slowly start to charge, and this should allow me to hopefully get some more benefit out of this wind turbine, because now it's going to be doing some work while I go off and collect some gold. I've collected some gold. Now we come back to our smelter. I pop the gold in there, but I can't. And that's because gold cannot be processed in the standard Crucible. We're going to need an arc furnace in order to process it. Put the silver out because it doesn't need to sit there. So let's head over to our assembler. And while we're gone, got 1 and a bit batteries charged, so that's something. Pop these away. And now we have to find the arc furnace. So we can search in the box up here, ARC. And here we go, 1 arc furnace. This is going to require 40 plate, 4 copper spools, and 4 silver contact mesh. Left click on that, we're going to make 1 of those. And this arc furnace is going to use the power in these batteries and made by this wind turbine in order to smelt the gold and to smelt anything else really if we want to use it instead of having to chop down trees to run our smelter. Okay, our arc furnace is complete. Pop that on my hotbar. I'm going to make a bit more room for this, as this is actually quite a large block. Stretch this out. And this is our arc furnace. So it's pretty big. That'll do. So this thing just needs an input of an ore. So I popped my gold in here just to store it briefly while I went away to do some other things. Pop it in the input and it will start smelting it. And if we watch our batteries, you'll see they're depleting rather quickly. The arc furnace chews through a lot of power. So we won't get a lot of that gold produced before these batteries are completely depleted. But now that we've got it, we can make our storage backpack add-on 2, which might be nice. I'll let it do 3 of these and then I'll pull this out and we'll save our power for now so that we can use our assembler to make more things that can make us some more power. But first, storage backpack add-on. Pop that into our backpack slot over here. Get rid of the yellow one. And look at that, 1700 liters, and we've got a jetpack. Excellent. So if you want to, you can also look into some of these other upgrades for your suit. We will be needing a helmet so that we can go to space at some point. And for that, we're going to need glass plate. We scroll down through this list and find glass plate. That's going to need silicon ingot. You may have noticed that when we scan with V, we see copper, we see iron, we see coal. You might have even seen some cobalt, some gold. But you haven't seen silicon. And that's because silicon's actually showing up on your scanner as these quartz crystals here. These are where we get silicon. So we need to mine these crystals. And they show up with that little crystal icon when you do your scan. The reason I haven't mentioned these until now is because just like the gold, these crystals, to be made into silicon, they can only be smelted in the arc furnace as well. But there's an extra requirement with these beyond what you have with your gold or any of the other ores. And that is, you have a minimum number before you can process them. So if we head back to our furnace, you'll see that if I grab just 2 of these, I can't put it in the input either. And if I put it down the bottom here, it won't get smelted. But if I put a single gold down, it'll automatically transfer to the input. On the other hand, if I put 4 quartz crystals in, as soon as this gold is finished, all 4 will go in and it'll produce some silicon for me. So I'm going to have to go around and collect a bunch more of these silicon crystals, which I can do from on my hoverboard, I think. There's a fair bit of travel to try and collect all of these. We're going to need a few of these for some of our other projects, not just for getting a helmet. The reason we need a helmet is because at some point we're going to space and we will suffocate if we don't have a way to enclose our head. Now that we have our smelter, it might be nice to be able to transfer items directly from it to our assembler, but also to have some cargo storage here because we're sort of building up a decent amount of stuff. So if we have a look through our list here, what we will find near the bottom are these blocks, storage units. Now, I think I might make 6 of those because that's going to make a decent sized storage where I can drop everything in there. And then we can use these blocks, conveyor tubes, to join between the storage, the assembler, and the smelter so things can pass between them without us having to be directly involved. What I'm going to do is just over here, let's place down a 1x2 large storage unit. And this thing is going to hold 64,000 liters, which means I'm never going to fill it. So the next step is to connect this cargo to our furnace. And the way we can do that is just by connecting anywhere on the furnace to anywhere on this storage unit. I'm going to be using this conveyor tube. I'm going to use a curved piece, rotate that with R till it's in the right spot. Go back to the straight one. And there we go, it's showing green, it's connected. Next up, I'm going to connect the assembler to these. But what I might do is actually move the assembler to the other side to make this even easier to connect. Shift click on everything to get it out. Pop that off. And we'll pop our assembler down just here. So that's going to put it in a much more convenient place for hooking them up to each other. And there we go. You can see, even at these cut out chamfered edges, there's this extra little bit that says that these are connected. So I can open the storage unit and I can put everything in here. There we go. That's all the stuff that needs to be in there. I can put stone in there too. And now, if I go to the furnace, you'll see that it's not actually doing anything, even though there's gold available in the container. So what we need to do is go to its advanced settings, and select Pull Needed Components from Connected Inventories. And now it pulls the gold in and it'll process it. And we'll also get it to push output to Connected Inventories too, because we want it to push it into that cargo container rather than leaving it in its own storage, because it's going to be more effective. And look at this, it's going to smelt the scrap down too. So instead of that scrap that we were processing into steel plate before, it can now be processed into ingots, thanks to our furnace. Same with the assembler. You can make sure that those options are selected. Pull needed components, push to connected inventories. And now if we need anything made from this assembler, let's say we want to make more power and the wind turbines just don't seem to be cutting it. So the other power options we have are reactors, but they're going to need fuel, or we can use solar panels, which apparently I can't find by scrolling, so I'm going to search for it. So let's make a few of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to need a whole lot more silicon to make these. So let's go out and collect that while it's processing. If you don't want to collect the silicon, if you find this to be not the way you want to go, you can make lots of those wind turbines too. In my play so far, I've found that the solar panels were quite a lot better, so I'm sticking with them. The wind turbines, I had to put a lot more work in to get enough of them that I could power the base reasonably well. Plus the solar panels we can take with us when we leave and use them in space to generate power while we're traveling to other planets. The wind turbines won't really work up there. So after coming back with some of the crystals, you can see my batteries are dead, my assembler is struggling to do anything, and so is the arc furnace, as they have long pauses while I try and build up some power. However, I have managed to get a couple of these solar panels, so I'm going to put some of them down, even though I'm planning on adding to these later. I'm going to drag this out until it is at max size, and we can now, if we go to tab and go to our current entity, see that it's producing 416 energy per second. That's compared to the 70 to 40 that I was making before. So that's why I like these solar panels. They do a lot. And you can see how much they're doing, that we're actually charging the batteries sometimes. There we go, with a few more solar panels on, we got 1,153 energy per second and using 1,180, so things are pretty close to breaking even, which means the smelter should be able to work nice and efficiently and work through the rest of this material that we've mined. So now it's time to start producing fuel. In order to produce fuel, we're going to need a lot of power, so I've started making some solar panels already, and the reason we need a lot of power is because the production of fuel involves using electrolysis to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And we're going to use an electrolyzer to do that, which is very power hungry, so let's search for electrolyzer. We're going to order up one of those, but we're going to need some way to get the water into that. So let's scroll down here until we get to this row with a bunch of red blocks in it. Here you can see that there is the fluid harvester. This is how we're going to collect the water, and we can also use this to collect gas in space. We're going to get a couple of tanks to have some water in them so that we can have collector into tanks, then tanks into electrolyzer. So we'll need some pipes to connect those up. So let's order up a few of those. Then I'm going to use this different style of tank, even though it uses up a bit of glass plate. We can use this different style of tank so that we can see what they look like. And these are the ones that we're going to use for the hydrogen and oxygen. So we're going to have to wait for all of that to be built before we can go down and set up our fuel production facility. If your home base happens to be closer to the water, that can be kind of handy because you can just use your same existing power infrastructure to build things. Speaking of power infrastructure, I did make the solar panels, but what I didn't do was make any batteries. But that's probably okay because the power draw from the electrolyzer is going to be constant, so whatever power I've got, it's not going to change much, so having the batteries isn't going to increase my output significantly. Here we are, we got a bunch of the equipment ready to go. Our solar panels, our tanks, a collector, our pipes, some more tanks, and the electrolyzer. We've got a starter block, which we're going to need for when we get down there, and we've got some scrappy hull to build the basic supports that we're going to need. Let's pick the closest direction to water, which I think is just straight down here. Top of my hoverboard, and off I go. Alright, here we are. At the water's edge. What I'm going to do, just because I like having this on the shore rather than out in the middle of the water, is I'm going to dig in a little bit so I can put my collector here and put the rest of it on the surface. Little trench, If you were determined to, you could actually dig like this in a straight tunnel down from wherever your base is, and you would find water, because the water exists as a perfect sphere underneath the planet's surface. So you can find it anywhere. That would be particularly time consuming though. As with creating our original base, make sure it's a green starter block when you place it. What I'm going to do is switch to the smaller size. Drag this out. And the first block I want to place is my collector. I want to place the biggest one that I can. That's not quite in the water, is it? I'll need to bring that down. I haven't tested where the exact cutoff is for these things being in the water, but it does need to decently visually be in the water at least. If you happen to have been someone who's tested that, I would love to know what that actually works out to be. Don't need our starter block anymore, so I'm going to pick that back up. Now, let's place our water tank. A water tank I'm going to make out of these blocks. I ended up making one more than I meant to, so let's make a nice wide oblong tank like that. Okay, that's going to be my water tank. Now, to make it my water tank, I need to configure it because the default is hydrogen. We're going to change this over to water. And I'm going to name this water tank. Get my pipe. Don't need to have this as a large pipe. I can make this as a nice small one. And connect these straight up to each other. So now our fluid harvester is going to harvest water, or just everything that's here, but we'll go with water. And then this tank will start filling. As you can see, it's already got a little bit stored. That's even without having put the solar panels on yet. So I'm going to do now, these are little wings on this tank. There we are. If I press tab and go to my current entity list, call this our fuel base, and you can see that our power generator is 861 energy per second. Nothing's really drawing any power at the moment. The collector doesn't require any specific power to run, but we've got 389 litres of water already. But the thing that does require a lot of power is this. So let's put our electrolyzer down, and we'll hook that up. And another bit of pipe in here. And we're going to hook this up to 2 more tanks. I would like to get an oxygen tank and a hydrogen tank. The hydrogen tank, I need to be bigger. I need more hydrogen than I do oxygen. So I'm going to put that like that. And the nice thing about these glass tanks is that as they fill up, you will actually be able to see the fuel in them. So I'll need to pipe these up. Again, switching down to the smallest pipe size. This one, I'm going to need to get a corner in. Just like the conveyor, it has the option to have a corner piece like that. But you can see that this isn't actually connected because I've left a tiny gap. So I'm going to have to scroll down to my nice thin piece here and put a pair of those in. Now this should start filling with hydrogen. There we go, 11 litres already. I forgot to change this one, so I've got 87 litres of hydrogen in this. I change that over to oxygen. So let's see what happens. It's now empty. It empties itself out and changes over. So I lost a little bit of hydrogen there because I forgot to change what was in my tank that I intended to be an oxygen tank. There we go. Let's check our power usage. So 861 energy produced, 1,152 energy used. So ideally, if I wanted this electrolyzer to work more efficiently or more continuously, I would have to increase the number of solar panels by about another 50%. But at least with this much in there, it is going to produce some. We've already got up 66 litres of hydrogen, and we've got 80 litres of oxygen made. That's not too bad. What this means is we've now got the fuel production needed for a reactor, the oxygen production needed for life support, which means we can get finally onto building our ship that can leave this planet. So let's head back to base. If you've forgotten where it is, press V, and it'll show up in the distance there. A nice little base symbol. Similarly, this is going to show a base symbol where it is. So even with my sense of direction, you should be able to find it. To begin building our ship, we need our starter blocks. We're going to need some scrappy hull. And the absolute core components are a spaceship computer and a yoke. And probably also a seat to sit on, because we want to be stuck to the ship when it starts moving around. With those, we can then also go for some batteries initially. So let's grab a couple of power cells. We're going to need somewhere to stick those down, so power cell base. Then some thrusters. Once all this is made, we can put together a fairly basic ship and then start adding the extra systems to it that we need in order to keep the thing functioning and make it more useful. Okay, let's get our yoke, seat, computer, power cell base, and the thrusters. To get building with this, we need to start with our starter block in the air blue. You can start it at any size you like. I'm going to start it relatively small because I want to keep this fairly compact, as it's going to hopefully make it a bit cheaper to make it usable initially. This starter block, when used on a vehicle, is anti-gravity, so I can build off this and it's not going to drop to the ground, which means if you start high enough up in the air, you can get underneath to build more flexibly and more easily. The positioning of the starter block and the direction you build these things in doesn't matter. The bit that controls orientation is your yoke. I'm going to start with just this beam to keep this relatively simple, and then we'll go with a chair. Nice pilot seat, and I'm going to leave 2 of the smallest blocks in front, clear, and then on that, I'm going to place my yoke, like so. The reason I chose that distance is that when I sit in this seat and press F4 to go to third person, if I then try and control this yoke, you can see that my arms manage to reach. Now, if that looks a bit uncomfortable to you, we can try and move it a little bit closer towards us. Try that. That looks a bit better. So maybe it's about 1.5 blocks is what we need to be comfortable. Adjust it till you're happy with how it looks. But it is pretty cool that our character actually grabs the yoke that it's in control of. Next thing we need is our spaceship computer, which I'm going to stick on the back of the seat here. Keeps everything nice and centered and neat. Then we need some power. So for our batteries, now I've made the bigger power cells, so I need the bigger base. So I'm going to press G to change to that one. We can place that down. I'll probably end up moving these later, but I'm just placing them for now so that we've got them, so we can start actually using this thing and getting a feel for where we might want to place blocks on it. Now for thrusters. To make this functional, all we need is a forward thruster, something to push us forward, and then some ones to push to the side. So I'm going to start with small ones on the side, one there, and one there. That's it. You don't need any more than that. This will let us fly. So let's go grab some of these power cells that we know are charged. I'm going to grab some of these uncharged power cells from our assembler. I'm going to grab the fully charged ones out of here. Unfortunately, charge balances between them, so by putting the empty ones in first, I sort of messed this up. Now I'll have to wait till this charges up to put in the last one. If you're going to make a vehicle that's battery powered, I can highly recommend keeping some spare power cells on your person, just in case you run out of power while you're flying around. So in my case, I've got 2 power cells on my second hotbar that I'm just going to keep there as an emergency. And now that we've got all the blocks in place, we just need to make this functional. To do that, we need our link tool, the arrows that you can see on our hotbar. If this isn't on your hotbar, go to the codex, find tools, and grab the link tool. And we need to link the yoke to the computer. Now, if we hop in the seat, grab control of the yoke, it'll bring up this nice little video telling you how to control, but it's the same as your jetpack pretty much. W to go forward, S to go backwards, A and D to strafe right and left, space to go up, control to go down, and Q and E to roll. But you can see, even though I've only got those 3 thrusters, I can move in all of those. This is not a good point for my third-person camera. You can, much better from first person. You can see that I've got all of these controls from those 3 thrusters. I don't need any gyroscope. I don't need anything for turning. It's just quite simple. Spaceship building in this is more about making something that looks cool and that functions in terms of combat, because once we get to space, there are enemies and missions and things and crew to hire and all that sort of stuff to do. So that's really where your shipbuilding will be focused on. What looks cool and what functions for those needs, less so than a more Kerbal Space Program style physics focus of the build. It's very much about building something cool, which is made even more possible because we've got pistons, rotors, hinges, and rails that we can slide things along, which is really, really cool. But a bit out of scope for today's video. Hopefully I'll get some time to learn those and then put them into a tutorial later. So, with this made, we have a functional ship. In order to get to space, we're going to need to enclose it. If you want to exit your spaceship, press F and you'll see a little thing pop up in the bottom right. Scroll up to exit spaceship, then hold down F again to exit the seat. So, we want to make this airtight. I'm going to grab these power cells out. I'm going to remove these bases. I'm going to remove these thrusters, leaving my starter block on here because I want this to be anti-gravity so I can build. Since I've left this parked quite high, I'm going to be using my jetpack to build from it. Your jetpack has two modes. One where you remain aligned to gravity like this. You don't need to press Q and E to roll, but it might make it difficult to get into some spots. If you tap J again, you get this mode of your jetpack where you have full, complete freedom of movement. And you can use whichever one you prefer. Tap it again to turn it off. I'll stick with this for now because I think it kind of makes it easier to pass when someone else is controlling it. So my first plan is to put a bit of a door on the back of this, and my starter block's kind of in the way, so I'm going to move it to the front, pop on there, pop that off, and you'll see the ship remains floating. If I took this off now, it would drop. Like so. But if I want to float it again, I can. By putting that on there, using my magnet tool, and it is now going to float up into the sky. Probably want to stop that from happening. It's going to go a little too far. To begin with, I'm going to make a bit of a box. My idea is to put some sort of door at the back of this ship for me to climb in through. So we'll make a blast door. We'll need to make 4 of the blast doors, otherwise we're not going to fit through it. The blast door, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this wall here against which I can place it. And the reason for that is that the blast door's opening orientation is very easily controlled by the surface that it starts at. Because now I can have that opening upwards, which is still going to look silly, but it's not going to look as silly as it popping out through the sides if I put little thruster nacelles or something on there. Now, this isn't centered, which upsets me, but not enough to change it. And before we get too excited on doing shaping, let's set up symmetry. So, moving our starter block off there, we've got our symmetry tool here. Grab it, put it on our hotbar, and I'm going to press R, and then left click when I've got it where I want it to be, which is the center there. Now I can go back to my blocks, and as I place them, they'll be placed perfectly on the other side. So that's going to save me a lot of time in the build. Now that I've got the back door in and I've got a little bit of shaping around it, what I'm going to do next is try and get a canopy on here so that I can make a fairly quick, fairly simple cockpit from which I can see out of. I could make the whole thing out of glass blocks, but it's going to take a fair bit of work to get it right. And I think starting out, I'm probably best off going with the canopy blocks because they're a bit simpler. So if we search here for canopy, let's make a couple of those. So with canopy blocks, these can be a bit more challenging to place correctly because they want to place on their middle. But what I want to do is I want to place them on this side. So to enable that to be possible, let's get our basic blocks. I'm just going to build some up to the height of these walls. So then I can go back to my canopy blocks, align them properly, and then stretch it out over the whole cockpit. That's going to tell me that I need an awful lot more blocks in order to cover this. And also, it's going to be a bit short. So I might need to build up that wall a little bit. So for our next section of this canopy, we're going to change to the corner shape. Like so. Stretch that across. And then I'm going to change to back to the other one, and we'll have this running across the front. But we need to get rid of a few blocks in order to get those to place where we want them. Place down another plane here. And there we are. It's simple, but hopefully it's going to be effective. We'll get rid of those extra blocks that were there just for shaping and positioning. Then I'll fill in this wall with armor in there. And there we go. We hop in through the door, get into our seat. We've actually got not too terrible a view. We have a really unfortunate bar right where we're looking. I could simply fix that by raising the seat and the yoke. So instead of them being down that low, we could bring them up a couple of blocks. How does that look? Hey, that's better. No more bar right in the middle of our view. Put our spaceship control back. Put our yoke back. Link the two together. Now we have it. Our enclosed cockpit. But for our enclosed cockpit, we're also going to need to have some way to make that breathable. So what we need there is this block here, a life support block. So we'll make one of those, we'll put it in, and we're going to have to link that to an oxygen tank so it can supply oxygen to our little cockpit. Convenient spots on the wall for these. There we go. O2 nominal. Entity has not been named. Let's give it a name of the brick, because this thing, it's a brick. So we're going to need power, we're going to need fuel, and we're going to need to reshape the front of this so that it follows the contours of that canopy glass a little bit better. For this ship, I'm not going to try and make any little doors or any clever little things to hide systems. I'm just going to have the systems exposed so that we can reach them. So let's extend this floor back and make it into a bit of a service area. And here we're going to place a couple of our battery holders. We need to make sure we're placing the bigger ones because we're using the bigger batteries. And let's get our batteries on there. Add a little bit more wall. So we've got our power systems. Now, I want to put some tanks on here. With the tanks made, let's also make a reactor. And with placing these tanks on our little ship here, need to have a think about where the reactor is going to be as well, because the reactor is going to need to be piped to these tanks. So I'm thinking I'm going to put the tanks on the outside here, put little thrusters on the back of them, even though they're not actually connected, but I think it'll look nice. But I can't rotate this the way I want. So just like before, what we're going to do is use a block like that to get the correct orientation that I want. Go with tanks like so. That's a tank on each side. And then we can remove those blocks. And then with our reactor made, grab it from our cargo container. And I could put it directly in front, like that. Oh yeah, that could work. I kind of like that. I'm going to stretch these out, because these are also scalable. There we go, we got reactors on both sides. I can put a pipe in between. Need to get the short bit. Like so. We got hydrogen tanks directly piped up to reactors, one on each side. Then I'm going to add our thrusters to the back, the same scale as the tube. I think that looks slightly less terrible. It's still a brick. It is still a brick, but it's getting slowly less brickish as we add little bits to it. Then I need to add my oxygen tanks. I'm going to stack them there just for symmetry's sake. Then I'm going to change this over to oxygen. Change this one over to oxygen. And then with our oxygen tanks, we're also going to select to provide oxygen for life support. That says there's a leak. Now if I close the door, O2 is rising. Perfect. So we can check with this whether it is airtight or not. And it is. So we're going to need some side thrust. I'm going to add a little bit of a keel shape under here, I think. Maybe a twin keel. We'll go with a slope there, and then we'll stretch this back. Then we'll need to have a ramp at the back here as well. Okay, with those mini keels in, what I should be able to do now is add some little thrusters for directional thrust. I'm going to put a few of them in because I think having multiple will look a bit more interesting. Alright, now that it's flyable, what it needs to have is a way to collect some resources when I get to space. So we're going to need to make a mining laser. Mining beam here. Let's make one of those. And we're going to, with that, need a way to control it. So to control a mining laser from the cockpit, we're going to need an event gate. So we'll build that as well. So for the mining beam, probably want it fairly central, fairly midline. A block like that, and then I can do this. We have our mining beam underneath. So now we're going to place our event gate in the cockpit, and then we're going to link the yoke to the event gate, and link the event gate, round we go outside, holding down left mouse the whole time, to our mining beam. And then we can hop in the cockpit, get in the chair first, get in the control, and now we can mine. Well, sort of. Now we can dig holes and drop resources on the ground, because resources will just drop on the ground with this beam. We need a way to actually collect it into some cargo. So we need to go make a collector and make some cargo. Exit out, we'll go do those. So the collector is this block, and the cargo is our storage unit. Pop those on our hotbar. So with our collectors, we need to make sure we've got a big enough collector that the chunks of ore can actually fit through. So I'm going to place one on either side of the drill here, so that if we have, say, this rock, it'll drop and it'll get pulled into that collector. And you can see it's now in the storage of it. I've put some cargo back here, and I'm going to pipe our collectors up to that. Don't need big conveyors for this. Do need conveyors. I keep saying pipes, but I actually mean conveyors. There we go. Now the rock goes all the way back to the storage container. Alright, let's test that again. Drop the stone out. Now, unfortunately, sometimes things will get dropped. In space, this will hopefully be a bit better, but on planets, it's my collectors competing with gravity, so it's not going to be ideal. But we now have a fully functional ship. All we need to do is load it up with oxygen and hydrogen, and we can go to space to collect that sunstone, which will open up a whole raft of other things, including faster travel and things like that. So that's our next step. With our ship ready to go, now we just need to make some fuel bottles, because that's what we're going to use to transfer the fuel from the fuel base into the ship. There is another method we could use using connectors. I search for connector. You can pipe up the connector to the fuel tanks and then connect that to a connector on the base, but that's going to be a whole lot of extra construction, and I'd like to get to space sooner. So I'm going to make a couple of these bottles, I'm going to fill them up, and we're going to use them to transfer the fuel across. We'll hop back in and fly down to our fuel base now. Although, I am thinking space is a long way away, and this ship is not very quick, so I'm going to give it a bit of a thruster upgrade before we head off as well, just to ensure that it doesn't take too long to get to space, because I think I gave it a little bit too little thrust. So to upgrade that, we'll build some more thrusters. So what I'm going to do is place a little slope on here, and then make a nice longer thruster on there. And hopefully that's going to allow us to go a fair bit faster. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a lot better. That's a lot better already. Excellent. That should make getting to space a little bit quicker. So in order to fill our tanks, what we need to do is take one of our bottles in our hand, press R on the tank. We can grab both at once if we like. Then we go over to our other tanks on our ship, press R to drop it back in. You'll see that it'll get nice and full. Do that until they're all full, and we'll do the same with the oxygen as well. And what I might do when I'm done with filling up these tanks is fill up my bottles one more time, just so that I've got a little bit of a backup safety emergency power supply in case we're out there and we run out of everything. There we go. Dump the remainder of that back in the tank because it's not full. Fill this one with oxygen. And now we're ready to head to space. Before we head to space, make sure you close your door and that the O2 over here says nominal. And then up we go. As fast as we can. As fast as we can into the asteroid belt. So I'm going to press tab, and that's going to set me into cruise mode. And our speed, 150 meters a second, that's going to be okay. It's still going to take a little bit of time to get up there. But once we get to the asteroids, our goal is to find some sunstone. And with that, we'll be able to use it to make a light drive engine, which is going to make us go a whole lot faster again, allowing us to explore the system, go out and do some missions, and get into some fun stuff like hiring crew and building really cool things. If you found anything that I've missed in this tutorial, if you've noticed anything that I got wrong, this update is fairly new, so it's entirely possible, and I'd love to know myself, so let me know in the comments. I'll be back with some more videos very soon, and I will see you then.